The Chinese sky balloon has fallen. What's up, everyone? How is it going? Looks like people are ready. Looks like people's bodies are ready. The Chinese sky balloon is no longer. It's been taken down. Sorry, I said sky balloon. Spy balloon, my bad. The Chinese spy balloon, that's probably not a spy balloon. Let's go. Agreed, New York commie. Let's go. It's been a while since I've done a stream. I've had crap going on, but we're back. We're excited. One more tune, because I've been working on guitar a lot lately. I got a new song. Pretty good. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Sick. I was hoping y'all would address the balloon, trying to figure out how to address it myself in my small circle without creating hysteria. I mean, it's difficult because the whole point is to create hysteria, right? Like, I was thinking about it before this and actually watching Hassan Piker's video on the subject. And it's really like he's talking about what would be the purpose of the State Department lying about this. It's like literally just to tell Americans, you know, China's spying on us, and to make Americans think our military budget is weak and it needs to be stronger, you know, and that our foreign policy needs to be stronger and more aggressive towards China, when nothing could be further from the truth, you know. And it's probably, according to the Chinese government, this was just an accident, like this, you know, balloon for like geographic or meteorological or data gathering purposes drifted off course into a U.S. airspace, and the U.S. was like, here's our chance. Like, here's our chance to start a war. It's like weapons of mass destruction just floated into our airspace. Actually, it reminds me of Gulf of Tonkin incident. Hearing people in my life give their takes on the situation has made me want to die. That's not good. Hang in there, Natalie. Yesterday, my BF's family was home. They said they were saying so many mixed random things. Yeah. I mean, people don't know what they're talking about when it comes to China. I mean, how could they? We're not taught the history of China. We're not taught like normal things about this country, about their culture and people. They're just treated like a comic book villain, or they're treated like they're comically stupid and weak and ignorant compared to the great American hegemon. There's a lot of traditional like Chinese or Asian stereotypes in American media, treating like they're dumb or lesser than Americans or servants of America. But yes, we're not taught a lot about China, so people's opinions on issues that involve China are often all over the place in the U.S. Hey, everybody. Hello, Where Pilgrim. Good to see you. Glad you're with us. Thanks for being here. Hello, the base cadet, the space cadet. Rest in peace, the balloon. True. It served its purpose. Hello, Comrade Eddie. Hi, Jacob. Peta Mio. Isn't it just a weather balloon? I don't know. I don't think it's like necessarily a meteorological balloon. It can be used for meteorological purposes, but it's like a data gathering balloon. You know, you could use it for weather, looking over certain terrain. And the U.S. is like, it floated over our missile sites in Montana. But as I said on TikTok, the missile sites in Montana are like 13,800 square miles of land. So it's like, yeah, if there's a balloon that happens to float into Montana, it's probably going to float over the missile site because the U.S. the U.S. and the U.S. empire has turned the entire state of Montana into a freaking missile silo, pointed at China and Russia and Iran and whoever else. Hey, Eddie, great video today on YouTube. Thank you. By the way, Michaela uses they them pronouns. Dang it. I hate when I accidentally mess up people's pronouns. Thank you for letting me know. Whoa, holy crap. $50 super chat. We got a lot of people in the chat today. How's it going, everybody? Thanks for joining us. Maybe it's because we haven't done a stream in a while, but it's good to see everyone. Sorry to hear about the personal stuff, Eddie, but keep your head up. I've heard nothing but great things about you since we were kids, and I'm sure that one day you'll be able to write some words that were in the PS to State and Revolution. You bet. What that joke means, I guess I'll explain the joke because I'm a nerd and I got to ruin it. When Lenin's writing State and Revolution, it cuts off at the end. And he's basically like, all right, I got to go do revolutionary stuff because there's a workers' uprising in Russia right now. So I can't write this book anymore. Peace. Then it ends. But thank you for the $50 super chat. That's awesome. I'm not sure if we grew up in the same area or know each other, but that's pretty cool. I guess I have gotten a decent reputation for myself. But thank you so much for the $50. That's incredible. Really going to go to support our project and help me not starve. Crazy. I don't know if we've ever got it. That's probably tied or second most biggest super chat we've gotten. Awesome. Thank you. The balloon was the golden opportunity for the U.S. to ramp up anti-China propaganda. Right. That's what like U.S. propaganda is so good at, and imperialism is so good at, is like preying on real things that happen, taking real things that happen and blowing them out of proportion. Taking real internal contradictions that exist in a country, like, right-wing groups or separatist groups, reactionary groups, in a socialist country, and then the U.S. will just throw gas on the fire and flame it. Here's a bunch of arms and weapons and support, and we're gonna, have our NGOs work together with you to help you overthrow the lefties. And the external contradiction that is imperialism preys upon the internal contradictions in whatever country the empire is targeting. Eddie, did you hear the news story about a woman who shouted "Long live Chairman Mao" as she cut off her landlord's head with a samurai sword for raising her rent? No, is that a real story? That sounds like The Onion or the Babylon Bee, but that is something else. Not that I condone samuraiing landlords right now, but I have to look this story up now. We have to find it. Oh, she really did. Wow. Well, landlords they should stop pestering people, especially if those people have samurai swords. Okay. I graduated a few years ahead of you, but you certainly kickstarted my interest in Marxism. Awesome. Wow. I'm very, very glad and grateful to have you, and grateful that you told me about that. That's pretty sweet, because it's hard when you do mostly like online stuff to see the real impact that the content we create has. So yeah, thanks for letting me know that. That's cool. And thanks again for the super chat. That's crazy. Crazy awesome. All right, you said Hassan was covering this. Did he have good things to say? I haven't met on Twitter since the $2 million home. Or since he bought the $2 million home. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into the spy balloon here in a sec. Hassan was just saying like he believes the Chinese government, because why would they lie about this? And that the U.S. is seemingly blowing this out of proportion. And I mean, now that Anthony Blinken is canceling his diplomatic visit to Beijing, it's like the U.S. is blowing this out of proportion, and China is stressing, let's be calm, let's take a rational approach to this, let's be professional, let's not inflame tensions. And the U.S. is like, let's call this balloon that's not a spy balloon, quote, the Chinese spy balloon. We'll say it over and over and over and over and over again. And then Anthony Blinken will cancel diplomatic visits to China, as if the U.S. and China are escalating towards war. When of course the U.S. has China surrounded with our military bases. The U.S. has China encircled by the most powerful and well-armed military in the world. But then a data gathering balloon floats into U.S. airspace, and no more diplomacy. It's crazy. Here's a little bit of Blinken. All right, the slang term is Chinese spy balloon, but according to the very official and very proper heads of the U.S. State Department, it's the Chinese surveillance balloon. Now we know. It's CPC. It is not the CCP. It is not the Chinese Communist Party. It's the Communist Party of China, the CPC. Dang it, that makes me so mad when they mess that up, because I know they're doing it on purpose. Oh, you guys can't hear the video? Dang, might be. All right, I got you. One sec. I must Oh, yeah, I didn't have the audio shared.
This weekend to China. As you know, I'd just like to briefly address the presence of the Chinese surveillance balloon in U.S. airspace. I spoke this morning with Director of the CCP Central Foreign Affairs Office, Wang Yi, to convey that in light.
So not the Chinese spy balloon, but the Chinese surveillance balloon. Very official, even though it's not a spy balloon or a surveillance balloon. Probably. Who knows? Maybe it is. But also CPC, not CCP, not the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party of China. Dang U.S. officials.
In light of China's unacceptable action, I am postponing my planned travel this weekend to China. As you know, President Biden and President Xi agreed during their meetings at Bali in November that I would travel to Beijing to follow up on their discussions. We've been working across the U.S. government to prepare for a substantive set of discussions on issues that matter to the American people and to people around the world. And we've been engaging for some time with our counterparts in Beijing to prepare for these meetings. Yesterday, the Department of Defense announced that we had detected and were tracking a high-altitude surveillance balloon that remains over the continental United States. We continue to track and monitor the balloon closely. We're confident.
Why wouldn't they just shoot it down? If it's a threat to U.S. security, just shoot down the balloon. Like, we pay $700 billion a year in defense. Our defense budget is more than the next 10 freaking countries combined. And it increases year after year after year. And that's just direct military spending. That doesn't even include, a lot of Pentagon costs or private contractor costs or, other costs associated with the enormous U.S. empire and maintaining that. So why do we pay all this money for defense, and then we can't even shoot down a literal balloon that floats into our airspace over our missile sites? It was literally over the missile sites. Why didn't you just shoot it down with one of the missiles? But instead, they just let it float around for as long as possible. Let people post TikToks of it. Let people post videos of it. Let Americans hear about this, incredible phenomena of the Chinese spy balloon. And then act like our military is incompetent. Act like we don't have enough defense spending. Act like we're not already encircling China with military bases, and we need to threaten them further. Spend more on defense. Spend more on the military. And it's just crazy that such a random event triggered this. And that the corporate media and that these disgusting imperialists like Antony Blinken, who's a skilled and experienced imperialist, skilled in the art of using the government to as a tool to benefit his corporate donors, even if that means overthrowing foreign governments and throwing their countries into chaos or starving their children with economic sanctions. But he's a skilled imperialist, so a freaking balloon floats into Montana from China, and he's able to use this as reason for why we need to be even more aggressive towards China, as poverty and inflation and homelessness are through the roof in the U.S. Wages are stagnant. We could use a jobs guarantee and all these different social programs and economic policies that would benefit the American people. But no, there was a balloon that floated into Montana. So we got to spend all our surplus, all our labor, all our resources, all our tax money on more defense spending, which is really, offense spending. So China has said, is a meteorological or data gathering balloon. And the main thing that they've just stressed is calm. Like if you go on CGTN, they're like, we're sorry, obviously this is bad. There's tensions between the US and China. So it's bad that a balloon from China would float into your airspace, but let's respond to this calmly like adults. Let's do this rationally. This is from Mao Ning, who's the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. Just over and over again, she said, this, isn't a spy balloon. We're not trying to spy on you. China's satellites have the ability to spy on the U.S. anyways. And like I said, those missile silos in Montana that apparently this thing was spying on take up over 13,000 square feet. So if China's satellites aren't able to pick that up, they're not very good satellites. But regardless, they have encouraged the U.S. to handle this calmly, have encouraged the U.S. to handle this professionally, cool-headedly. And this was before Antony Blinken announced that he was not going to take his diplomatic visit to Beijing. So the Chinese foreign minister was literally on the phone with Antony Blinken, like, all right, let's just be calm and professional about this. We didn't mean to do anything negative. We didn't mean to fly, aircraft into your airspace. Obviously, it's just a balloon. Our satellites could pick up this information anyways. And then Blinken's like, oh, this is, a terrible act by China, calls it a violation of international law, which is hilarious coming from the U.S., the country that in the past 2 decades has destroyed Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine. I mean, we can list the number of murderous U.S. interventions forever. But when China, floats a balloon into Montana, we're going to freak out and call it a violation of international law. When we called our carpet bombing of Serbia and Yugoslavia, or NATO's carpet bombing of them, just according to international law, like, what does international law even mean to Antony Blinken in the U.S.? Nothing. But yeah, they've responded in the opposite way as what China has encouraged, as what would make sense, in a world that made sense, in a world with a foreign policy of mutual cooperation between world superpowers, which is what China wants. The U.S., would say, oh, yeah, sorry about the balloon. We're going to shoot it down now or whatever. But instead, they're trying to turn it into incentive for war. Like it's the Gulf of Tonkin incident or the WMDs in Iraq. So let's see if I have anything else on this. Called it a reckless violation of international law. And yeah, just so you can get a visual, these are the U.S. military bases surrounding China. This is what it looks like. So we're mad that a Chinese balloon floated over Montana when the U.S. has encircled the country of China with our military. You know, the U.S. military that has carried out countless horrific regime change acts in the past 70 years to, even longer than that, of course. So the hypocrisy of Anthony Blinken to be like, this is a reckless violation of international law. How could they spy on Montana and the 4 people who live there? It's like, well, I don't think they did, but even if they did, they would have reason to, because we've got them encircled and we're pointing a loaded gun at them. So what do I know, though? So yeah, I mean, and why this is scary is because like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which triggered Vietnam, I believe, right? Was it the justification for Vietnam, or like the WMDs in Iraq? There's always some incident, something that they use to justify, warfare or intervention or regime change. And, that could be what the U.S. is trying to do here. It couldn't, it might not be the event. I'm not saying the U.S. is about to invade China on behalf of the balloon or, in retaliation for the balloon. But, it adds to the mounting list of just ridiculous propaganda allegations, falsified allegations by the U.S. against China that are created and alleged for the purpose of manufacturing consent for regime change, or, getting the American people to fear and hate China and look to their government to protect them from China with more defense spending and all that. Was there any evidence that it was actually a surveillance balloon or not? No, that's what's so funny, too, is because the media, like the talking heads, and then Blinken, they're like, we are absolutely certain. We have complete evidence that this is a Chinese spy balloon or a surveillance balloon. But they never say what the evidence is. They never say how they know that. They're just like, the Pentagon has such amazing technology and capabilities that we know exactly what the balloon is. We couldn't shoot it down before it got into our airspace, but we know its exact properties and where it came from. And it's just nonsense. So no, not a lot of evidence that it was a surveillance balloon. And China's admitted that it was their balloon, and they're saying it's not a surveillance balloon. But we know evidence never stops the U.S. from doing and getting and saying what they want. And that's the darn truth. They kept saying the balloon had a payload. So stupid. What does that even mean? Like it was supposed to go back to China with information? Or a comrade I know recently introduced me to Midwestern Marks, and I have to say that you're based AF. Let's go. Shout out to your friend who introduced you. Shout out to Carlos and me for being based AF. We do what we can. The U.S. has the highest budget due to corruption and price gouging. That does not necessarily mean the best. Russia and China have proved it can produce more advanced military tech with less money. Jimmy Timmy, I agree with this point, and I think it's a good point. I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately. The military-industrial complex, price gouges the crap, or not price. I mean, they do set prices super high, and they're price gouging taxpayers ultimately, I guess. But they're paid these giant sums by the government, but it's not, it's not very efficient. It's to keep shareholder dividends and corporate profits and corporate surplus for these companies that make up the military-industrial complex really high, right? So they're going to set prices as high as they can. And there's a really, really, really good book by Nick Turse called The Complex that details like all of the the companies that actually make up the military industrial complex. And it's companies that would surprise you. It's like Starbucks and Apple, and Microsoft, and certain cereal brands, and like Kraft mac and cheese, and it's all these different consumerist products. And like, not only will the military bases like set up spots where they sell consumerist products that lead to profits for Apple and whoever else, or that is what'll happen. So all these different companies are making money from the government, just being handed money by the government, which they then come to rely on, to maintain normal operations. They rely on getting this money consistently. So overall, what that means is the U.S. military budget is insanely high. It rises every year, and often multiple times a year under Democratic and Republican administrations. But that does not mean we have the best or the strongest or the most powerful military, because it's extremely inefficient, and it's just extravagant and set up to, pad the bank accounts of military industrial complex corporations. And, the U.S. has undergone a lot of financialization over the past 40 years, especially. A lot of deindustrialization, outsourcing of good manufacturing jobs. We don't have much of a productive base anymore, right? So China and Russia can outproduce us, as is being shown in Ukraine right now. The U.S. is already asking Latin America and, European allies to send more weapons to Ukraine because the U.S. can't produce them fast enough. But it's still the most expensive, because we're paying for the salaries of these corporations and the inflated prices set by these military industrial complex conglomerates. Who wrote that book, The Complex? Nick Terse. He's a really good journalist and academic. How the military invades our everyday lives. That's what it's about. Because he's like, even if you try and be anti-war, and like boycott certain companies tied to the military industrial complex, there's like no way to do it, because like your breakfast cereal is part of the military industrial complex. There's too much concentration of capital and the means of production, ultimately ownership of it anyways. So too much concentration of the societal surplus into too few hands. So now every company belongs to the military industrial complex, and America is just an imperialist financial oligarchy of a country. And it sucks. We need to have a socialist revolution. Imagine the average patriot being misled into aggression just to use subpar military equipment so some capitalist pig can lap their way to the bank. It is sad. It is sad people are deceived into this. Like, we got the best military. We got the best defense. We don't. We're just good at doing illegal regime change efforts and then pretending it was legal, and funneling U.S. tax dollars into mega corporations and sending the country into tons of debt. Jared Cardenas, hello. I got to be an auditor, and 98 people in the stream. Thank you, everyone. Make sure to like, share, comment on the stream. Thank you all for being here. Enjoying it very much, as always. Let's see. I used to be an auditor. I got to see the compensation sales for a few of the S&P 500 execs. They were enough to make you puke. So I can't imagine what Blackstone and Lockheed is shelling out. Yeah, that's insane. As a part of the Journal of American Socialist Studies 2 article I just did, which, by the way, you can get that now on MidwesternMarks.com. $30 for paperback, $10 for the ebook. But I try to do the beginnings of a comprehensive analysis of the American healthcare system. It's not comprehensive, but try to give a historical outline of how it got to the point where it's at today. And I was calculating the shareholder dividends that shareholders at Blackstone and Vanguard make for their ownership in these healthcare conglomerates. And it's just out of control, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars being produced by selling people healthcare services, overpriced healthcare services, and taking a surplus and paying it out to these shareholders over and over and over again, and price gouging the crap out of the entire American populace in order to continue doing so. So it's just incredible when you actually lay the numbers out and you see it. And, we can see, like, they spend billions of dollars on lobbying the healthcare industry and the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. So they're spending billions of dollars of their surplus just to lobby the government, just to bribe the government. They spend billions on marketing. They spend billions on all these different things that are to increase sales and increase their surplus that have nothing to do with healthcare, and it's absurdly inefficient. So not only, are shareholders and investment companies like Vanguard and BlackRock collecting the surplus of society and making it incredibly unequal as far as who has the money and the ability to buy the means of production and buy commodities in general. But it leads to extreme inefficiency in the mode of production, extreme inefficiency in how we produce, because there's all these resources and all this surplus that could be, and all this capital and labor that could be invested in the actual healthcare system, actually providing, administering healthcare and expanding the amount of resources we have to do so and the efficiency in using those resources. But instead, we're shelling it out to shareholders and using it to lobby the government and make sure nothing ever changes and gets better. And it's going to be that way until there's some kind of uprising, until there's a social revolution that shocks the system and qualitatively changes it, because this is the way the system's currently designed to work. Why do you think you keep getting banned from TikTok specifically versus YouTube and Twitch? Oh, good question. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat, by the way. Much appreciated. I think it has a lot to do with who manages the content at TikTok. Well, first of all, we're not as big on YouTube or Twitch as we are on TikTok, and it's not even close. Like, since I started our new TikTok account like 2-3 days ago, since the last one got banned, we're already up to over 14 or 15,000 followers, right? And on Twitch, so that's like double what we have on Twitch. And then, that's just like 10,000 followers less than what we have on YouTube total. We've been doing YouTube for years, and we've been doing this new TikTok account for a few days. So we're just like way more popular on TikTok. So, we attract a lot more attention, attract a lot more hate, a lot of people mass reporting our account and contacting TikTok trying to get us banned. So that's a major reason. But also there's this factor that TikTok used to be managed by China, but then the US threw a hissy fit and said, China's stealing our data. They're infringing on our national security. They're spying on us via TikTok. Even though Silicon Valley corporations are collecting the data of American people, and China had to put up a great firewall so that they would stop doing it. So again, it's just the U.S. projecting on China and accusing them of doing the things that we've done to them. But either way, they forced them to hand data management of TikTok over to this I think they're based in Texas, but either way, it's a company called Oracle, US-based company called Oracle. And Oracle put in charge of content management at TikTok a bunch of national security agents and a bunch of former NATO officials. So now you have all these U.S. State Department hawks managing the content at TikTok. So every time we appeal a video that gets taken down for community guidelines, or every time someone says our account should be banned, it's a bunch of freaking NATO ops who then look at my video talking about how NATO is doing a proxy war in Ukraine and, all the horrible stuff that NATO's done. They're like, yep, take this guy's account down. Take these Midwestern marks, folks, and throw them in the garbage. And then that's what happens. And then we come back stronger, and then they ban us again because they're scared. And they know they can't defeat the immortal science of Marxism-Leninism. Cockshaw gave an interesting critique of the Austrian school. Yeah, I mean, it's just rare that a lot of Marxists have read the Austrian school, but one of my buddies on TikTok actually has read a lot of them. I'm not sure what Henry's name. His name's Henry, but or their name's Henry, but I don't know what his TikTok name is or their TikTok account is right now. But they're pretty good with that. And like Cockshot has read everything because he's a human supercomputer. So I'll be right back. I need some water. Whoa, thank you for the super chat. I will get right on this as soon as I'm back. Thank you. Whoops. Almost fell. We're back. Currently, I'm dealing with Adventist Health, who did a systematic buyout of rural hospitals across the U.S. the last few years. Had you heard about that? Well, I had not heard of Adventist Health, or I didn't know that was the specific company doing it. But I did do an article for Midwestern Marks called "The American Healthcare System is Failing Rural America," basically explaining the phenomena of companies buying up the rural healthcare, or hospital systems shutting down hospitals in rural America that weren't profitable. So these are places, populations of people who require healthcare, need healthcare, just like anybody in the modern world. And they rely on certain providers for that healthcare. But the hospital systems, the conglomerates, the shareholders, the corporations at the top are shutting down rural providers because it's not profitable, because these populations of people aren't paying enough money for healthcare services, aren't buying enough or, a high enough volume of healthcare services to make it profitable for the shareholders. So it's like in the last decade, there have been like well over 100 rural hospitals that have been shut down, that have been just, gotten rid of completely and left the communities without access to care, within miles and miles and miles. And it reminds me of, it's the US, so it's different than, Cuba was, but there's that Michael Parenti lecture where he's talking about Cuba before and after the revolution. And he says he's talking to these people in the Escambray, the eastern rural regions. And they said, previously, before this, when someone got sick, we had to walk like 2 days to the nearest hospital. And a lot of times they died by the time they got there, which is actually something that happens in this. It's like a Spanish reader I'm doing right now. It's like a book for learning Spanish, but it's about the Cuban Revolution. And they explain how people had to walk miles for healthcare and they would be denied if they were poor, and, how that caused people to die. After the revolution, there's a hospital everywhere in every rural town, every rural area, within, 15 miles or so. So they ensured that everybody has access. And, even though the U.S. is the richest country in the world, even though we spend more money on healthcare than every other country in the world by far, which, similar to the military-industrial complex that we just talked about, doesn't mean the U.S. has the best healthcare, the most efficient healthcare. In fact, we have the worst health outcomes in the developed world. We're just getting price gouged. But either way, in the U.S., the wealthiest country in the world, capitalism has prevented us from giving everyone healthcare, providing everyone healthcare, versus Cuba has been under these horrific economic sanctions, but socialism has still been able to give everybody the care that they need. And thank you very, very much for the super chat. Thanks for letting me know about Adventist Health. Also, I'll have to look into that. Because like I said, my journal article about healthcare, it's not comprehensive. It doesn't cover every corporation, but I did go through like the top 5 most profitable healthcare corporations, and then a lot of them in the top 100, and talked about where their shareholders are, A lot of them are, Vanguard and BlackRock, these giant investment companies. But there's a lot more work to be done, in order to make like a comprehensive analysis of American healthcare from a Marxist perspective. But maybe I'll have the chance to do that work someday. Austrian economists like Hayek were against socialism, but the only thing they said was socialism is when the government does stuff. Yeah. They had a pretty comical view of socialism. And Hayek also hilariously said with the ECP, like, the ECP proves that no socialist planning is ever possible. And there could never be, a socialist economy at any point in history. It's like, don't act like you can predict the future. Like, everything is in constant change. Everything is in constant development. Like, this is one of the main principles of dialectics. And then these Austrians are just like, nope, I did a few calculations. Socialism's impossible. Like, okay, Hayek. Insane. I'm in the 5th largest economy in the world, and the nearest place to have a child is a 2-hour drive through the Redwoods. That is insane. Thank you again for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate you supporting the project. But yeah, it is wild. A 2-hour drive through the Redwoods. That's crazy. And what if your car breaks down, or what if it's a medical emergency? What if somebody's appendix bursts and you need that care fast? Like, I haven't had a ton of horror stories, like with the healthcare system or anything, and I don't even consider this a horror story because, it's not that bad of a story compared to what tons of people have experienced with the healthcare system. But I dislocated my elbow. Like, it was gross. It was popping out here. They couldn't get it back in place at the tournament I was wrestling at. So I had to drive to the hospital, and I wanted to go to the hospital in the Wisconsin Dells, the place where the wrestling tournament was, but we couldn't. We had to go to the hospital where we lived, which was 50 minutes away, because that was the only one that was covered by our insurance. So you see how the insurance system, fragments the American healthcare system. But I was in pretty severe pain for those 50 minutes. I could feel the point of my elbow down here touching a place where it wasn't supposed to touch. It kept making me sick. If we had a cohesive public single payer healthcare system, I could have just gone to, a hospital in the Dells, because that happens to be where I got hurt. And then one of my buddies, I think I've told this story before on TikTok. He was in a moped accident, and he cut like his groin area. And it was as bad as you would think. He didn't lose anything. He's okay, but he punctured an area that you really, really don't want to puncture near that area with the handles of the moped. So he's like bleeding out in this ambulance, in severe pain, freaking out, going into shock after this hitting a car in his moped. And our other friend flew over, his head, landed on the ground, and he was okay. But either way, buddy was really, really hurt and freaked out. And the people in the ambulance are asking him, what hospital should we take you to? He's like, I don't care, whatever one. They're like, no, what's your insurance cover? He's like, what? I don't know. And they're like, you got to find a hospital within the system. And I looked up what hospitals, are covered by the insurance that I have like a few days ago. Like, who just has that information off the top of their head unless, you've done it before? If you're a young adult, if you're a college student, you don't know, what hospitals in your college town are all covered by your insurance plan. I mean, most people don't. But that's what the ambulance companies have to ask you, or the ambulance employees have to ask you, because it's not about providing the best and most efficient care. It's about making money off that care. Meanwhile, Cuba produces a surplus of physicians. Literally, they have more than they need. And the way that the U.S. acts like, how do we get doctors and nurses to serve in these rural areas? And it's like, there are ways to do this. Cuba and Venezuela have been doing this. They offer free medical school if you go and serve 2 to 5 years in the Escambray, in the rural regions, in places that don't have enough health care or need more workers. But the U.S. has to price gouge our populace, our citizenry, for every last dollar we're worth, or our capitalist ruling class does. So they have to charge us every penny they can for medical school. So it creates a barrier for people who are smart enough and have the capacity and capability to do med school, but not the financial ability to get in. It creates a barrier there. And, it could be the reverse. We could be paying for people's medical school if they agree to serve in rural regions that need more medical employees. But we can't do that. No, it's all about profit surplus, profit surplus. Can't have a useful and efficient system that makes sense for the vast majority of people. Wear Pilgrim, interesting. Even in Canadian hospitals, there can be challenges. They might try to psych you out so that you consent to an earlier discharge. Then you might be warranted to free up space. Yeah, there's still issues with rationing. It's not like they have unlimited health care just because they have a single payer or a public insurance system, which that's a good point. This is one of the main things, not one of the main things, but it's something I always point out when people are talking about healthcare, because there are a lot of people who are just like, it's just the U.S. system that's bad, and the U.S. system is uniquely bad because it's uniquely privatized and profit-based, right? But that doesn't mean Canada and European countries, or even a country like the UK, who has the National Health Service, a fully public system. Like these, because they're still operating within capitalism, a broader system of capitalism, and because the governments of these countries are capitalist dictatorships, there's still huge issues and inefficiencies with the healthcare systems, right? And especially with the U.S., if you have Medicare for all, it would be very, very expensive because of the price gouging and the profiteering of the ambulance companies and the hospital systems and the pharmaceutical companies that now, the single payer system would be paying for. So there's nothing stopping them from continuing to price gouge and continue to control markets and prioritize profit and surplus over, providing efficient and useful healthcare. So, there's various problems until you make the whole mode of production socialist, really. Just to get right down to it. They tried to charge me $176 for a COVID test that they made me take and you can get for free. Yeah, that's classic. That's classic. They'll charge you for like tests that they didn't even do, or they'll charge you for consultation with the doctor when he tells you like 3 things. It's just freaking absurd. We'll take Ayn Rand theory and a Mises-based computer to solve all our problems. You guys will call it Minerva. It will be shocked to your system. Austrians are goofy. James W. Ford seems right up Eddie and Carlos's alley. Huh. I don't know who that is. Oh, VP. Oh, yeah. I do know who this guy is. Sorry. He was the VP in the Communist Party, yeah. I believe he was the first Black American to run for office alongside Earl Browder. Let's see if I'm right about that. Thought he was. He got fired from his job at the post office due to being a communist. Sad. Stuff happened. I don't know if he was the first. Maybe I was making that up. First. Oh, no, he was. He was also the first African American to run on the U.S. presidential ticket in 1932. Yay. Yep. So I did know who James Ford was. Yeah, it's cool. I wish the Communist Party would run someone for president every year like they used to. Because they would say, we know the elections are rigged against us. We know, we're not going to win this bourgeois election. But here's our platform. It's very, very basic things for the working class. Here's what we want. Here's what we want implemented. Here's how we're going to implement it. Come and join us, because neither of the Democrats or the Republicans, these bourgeois political parties, are going to do these things for you because they serve the capitalist class versus we want to serve you. But now, you have the communist parties, certain communist parties, I'll just say, in the U.S., talking about how we need to just support the Democrats and use our energy and our time and our labor, to support the Democratic Party, one of these bourgeois parties. It's like, how is that the best strategy or the best place to put our focus, to focus our efforts? We should, if we're going to run candidates in these bourgeois elections, they should run, on a pro working class ticket. They should run on, class-based issues that are going to appeal to a mass amount of people that really show, how the socialist platform is vastly different than the Democrats or the Republicans, because it's all based on the class that your political party is trying to serve. But we can't, I feel like this is just so obvious, and these obvious things are what the Communist Party and stuff used to do. But it's like now people have internalized McCarthyism. Now communists are like, a lot of them seem like doomers or nihilists. There's a lot of this idea that we can't have socialism in America because our history is just too violent and bad. Like every country's history is violent and bad. Ours might be uniquely so, but the answer to that is, an uprising of the toiling masses, a society based on the toiling masses, and a society for the society itself, not a society that functions for capital. Try to siphon away from both the Dems and Repubs? Sure. I mean, something like 60% or less of the country votes in the presidential elections. Like, people don't even vote. People talk about, who do we radicalize? Who do we talk to as socialists and communists? The Democrats or Republicans? It's like the workers, right? Socialism has never been based on, what political party or what political opinions people have. That matters. It has something to do with it, but it's all about their economic class, their position within the economy, what they do during the day. Do they work or do they own? That's going to determine what their interest is politically, ultimately. So you should talk to workers, which there are workers, who vote Democrat, and there are a lot of workers who vote Republican. There are a lot in both parties. And then you got 40 to 50% of the country that doesn't vote even in the presidential election. Most, aren't going out to vote in the congressional elections or state elections and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's plenty of people to be recruited. There are plenty of people to be educated. And we have to get rid of this self-harmful idea that we can't talk to people about socialism and we can't criticize the Democratic Party because they might be a little bit better than the Republican Party in their rhetoric. We have to pitch socialism to people and expose the bourgeois political system no matter what. If one of the parties acts a little bit more compassionate than the other party, that shouldn't change our strategy drastically. Like, oh, we got to, side with the compassionate bourgeois party, because they're not actually compassionate. They're still exploiting you and still making sure you don't have health care and still invading other countries with your tax dollars and sending your kids to fight and die in wars for capital expansion. So Putin gave a speech recently. I always think it's interesting when Putin gives these speeches because they're usually very clear, and usually have a lot of historical knowledge in them, or a lot of historical information. And, I'm not like a big Putin stan or anything, but it's just interesting to see the contrast between him and then Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken in the U.S. These leaders that we have melting down about the Chinese surveillance balloon, and, dragging the people's attention every which way. We got to fight Iran, or we got to fight Iran. We got to fight China. We got to fight Russia. We got to fight Syria. We got to fight all these countries and build up our build up our military. It's always the same propaganda talking points, empty, hollow speeches from these State Department ghouls like Biden and Blinken and Vice President Harris and whoever else. But with Putin, there's a lot of substance there. What he's saying is very interesting, and the media often just calls it all propaganda and all made up and tries to portray him as some kind of madman. But it's clear to anyone who listens to the full speeches, who listens to the actual speeches, including people I talk to in real life who aren't glued to politics, they're like, well, his speech made a lot of sense, his speech, or his speech made a lot more sense than like what Biden was saying, is what you hear from a lot of Americans. So yeah, I just think they're always interesting to watch. Here's just a little TikTok clip of one of his speeches from Sky News. I figured this would be good to react to. It's only like 36 seconds long.
Невероятно. Невероятно, но факт. Нам снова угрожают немецкими танками «Леопард».
Hold on, you can't really see that. Let me try the old zoom. Zoom. There we go.
Невероятно. Невероятно, но факт. Нам снова угрожают немецкими танками «Леопард», на борту которых кресты. И вновь собираются воевать с Россией на земле Украины руками последующих Гитлера, руками бандеровцев. Мы свои танки к их границам не посылаем. Но у нас есть чем ответить. И применением бронетехники дело не закончится. Все должны это понимать.
So he said, drawing parallels between what's going on now and World War II, saying that once again there are German Leopard tanks with crosses painted on them, threatening Russia, attacking Russia, and they're in the hands of, Banderites, supporters of Hitler, ethno-nationalists, and, that is hyperbole in some sense, because obviously much of the military, there are, tons of Ukrainians who aren't Banderites, including, Ukrainians in the military, but the leadership, a lot of the leadership and a lot of the most powerful militias who control, large sections of the Ukrainian government do have this ethno-nationalist ideology. And, the vast majority of the country has a, very rightward leaning ideology. You have this extremely, extremely anti-Russian government that was put in power in 2014 by a U.S. coup. So, a lot to be criticized about the Ukrainian government that Russia's fighting, of course, and a lot of similarities and parallels to be drawn to the fascists in World War II. And then he says it won't end with the armored vehicles, though, right? Like Russia is going to respond. They're going to blow up these Leopard tanks that Germany sent that are being driven by Ukrainian people, and more people are going to die in this conflict, and more of Ukraine is going to be flattened and destroyed, which is, it's horrific at this point, the amount of damage that's been done and the amount of human life that's been lost. But what Putin's saying here is the West just keeps inflaming this. They just keep throwing more fuel on the fire. If they wouldn't have done the coup in 2014, the fascist threat in Ukraine wouldn't be that big of a deal. There was a more moderate president in power who, yes, was corrupt. But he was saying, we're not going to ban the Russian language. We're going to give people in the Donbass and Donetsk and Lugansk peace, and security, and allow them to practice their culture and their way of life. Then the U.S. said no, and U.S. NGOs created a color revolution, and this extremely anti-Russian government got in power who made Stefan Bandera, the Nazi Hitler collaborator and mass murderer, a national hero of Ukraine, and outlawed the Russian language and allowed these militias, these Banderites, to start shelling people in the Donbass and blowing up their homes. So the West has created this conflict, and they've inflamed it more and more with weapons and Leopard tanks and Javelin missiles and everything else. And Russia has responded by blowing it all up and shredding the country of Ukraine and killing more and more Ukrainians, who the U.S. are basically sending at, pushing at gunpoint towards Russia, pushing towards their death at the hands of Russia. So it's just disgusting at this point. It's awful. There's, at this point, now that Russia made the decision to intervene, they have to carry it out, finish and secure their strategic security and military objectives. And, the U.S. just keeps throwing fuel on the fire, keeps throwing more and more weapons and support and talking about how they need to fight to the last Ukrainian, right? And it's interesting that he brings up Germany and the German Leopard tanks in Germany's history with Russia. Because, of course, we had maybe the most shocking revelations of this entire conflict from Angela Merkel at the end of last year in December, when she said that the U.S. and Germany never planned to follow the Minsk agreements. Right? The U.S. and Germany and NATO never, ever, ever planned to abide by a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. And Merkel said straight up that this peace agreement was nothing but a stalemate so that Ukraine could build up their military forces, so that they could build up their military capacity. And when Russia finally did decide to intervene, when they finally did invade, NATO was training troops right at Russia's border, which Putin mentioned in that speech. We don't have troops at Germany's border, right? That's what he was referring to. NATO was training, over 100,000 troops to be NATO interoperable right on the border of Russia, like literally gearing up for war and threatening to pour into the country and infiltrate the country. So Russia sent their troops, their military, to meet them, to, form a border, a boundary to Russia. And then eventually they invaded. But, a conflict was destined whether Russia happened to be the ones who invaded or not. That's helpful for the U.S. that Russia was, because, it makes it easy to portray Russia as imperialist invaders just trying to conquer the nation of Ukraine for no reason because Putin's bloodthirsty. But they were destined for a conflict anyways. As Angela Merkel said, the U.S. and NATO never planned to abide by a peace agreement. Right? The peace agreement was a sham so that they could build up their military forces. For what? Build up their military forces for what? To attack Russia. What else would it be? For proxy war with Russia, which NATO said in their recent strategic summit, which I actually have pulled up in an article too. Maybe not. Maybe I didn't have that one pulled up. But I can get it. NATO adjusted their broader macro level strategy at the recent summit, saying that Russia is the number one threat, most significant and direct threat to U.S. interests and security. And then they singled out China as, like the second biggest challenge to our interests. So NATO's basically announcing that they want to attack Russia. They said that the peace agreements between Ukraine and Russia were never going to be followed. And then people still don't understand how it was the U.S. who provoked and created this conflict. They still don't understand, no, but Russia invaded. Russia's in Ukraine, not the other way around. How could it possibly be the U.S. who did this? Like Angela Merkel and NATO and the U.S. are literally telling you. They're literally telling you, we never wanted peace. We always wanted proxy war. Like, how can you not see it? How can you deny it? People just wild as hell, man. I really do be blowing my mind. I really do. Like, how thoroughly people allow themselves to be deceived by the mainstream media machine. I know it's just because I've, been privy to their games and the lies of the media since, started figuring it out really when I was like, I don't know, it's hard to say. Really when I was like 13, but more seriously when I was like 20, so 5 years ago. once you know what the media and the State Department and the war machine do, how they operate, how they do things, again and again and again, because there's obvious patterns there. It's like, how do people not see this nonsense, right? How do they not see this BS? And, in a lot of instances, people do see the absurdity of it all. They don't understand necessarily why it happens, or what the U.S.'s actual objectives are, but they see the absurdity of spending this much on our military, or melting down about the Chinese spy balloon. But I don't know. It's hard to see, like, how does everybody not get this? How does everybody not see that NATO and the U.S. are a capitalist imperialist empire, and they just provoke all these other countries around the world and then lie about them like crazy? Hey, just watch your video on that idiot Dinesh. I can't wait until he goes to jail for breaking multiple laws multiple times. Okay, I'm glad you like that. We'll take a little detour for a second so I can talk about this. What did people think of that video about Dinesh? I mean, if you saw it, it's on our YouTube channel right now. It's pretty different than what I normally do, but it's because of who that guy is. Between Dinesh and Seabass, who Dinesh has now teamed up with, like, they need to be exposed and called out. And I felt the need to call out him specifically because he has 1.5 million followers. He pretends to be a leftist, someone fighting for the oppressed, someone fighting for social justice. And he is literally a scammer, a well-known scammer, a doxer, someone who does not care about oppressed people or about exploitation or about anti-capitalism or any of these things at all, in the slightest. It is all 127,000% a grift for money. And I know because this person doxed me, released all my personal information, and got our TikTok account banned, tried to get me fired from my job, had people calling and emailing my employer telling them that I supported things which I didn't. So someone hit me up about exposing this guy, and I was like, we have to. Like this, I mean, I'm totally down if people are going to come together and explain, the scams this guy's pulled off. His name's That Guy Dinesh on TikTok. And he has teamed up with Seabass. Some of you remember Seabass, the guy who I had that
Hello, everyone. My
debate
name is
with
Eddie.
on the Conscious Lee, who had like a mental breakdown and like melted down and started screaming. That guy is teamed up with this other guy, and they both doxed me, right? Both released my personal information on TikTok, which is sweet. I'm glad they've gotten together, and I'm glad they're working together now to release my personal information maybe more quickly, more efficiently. That's good for them, ideal for them. But, normally I'll make videos about like other political pundits engaging with their arguments and debating the ideas. But usually I won't make a video saying this person absolutely sucks. I'll do videos about like Vaush, talking about the role he plays within online media, and getting people who think they're socialists or leftists to become liberals. I'll talk about things like that. But usually I won't just say this person's a scammer, this person's a piece of junk. But Seabass and That Guy Dinesh are scammers. And, well, Seabass, I don't know if he's a scammer, but he's a doxer. And Dinesh is a scam artist, a doxer, and a big old piece of poop. So block them. Block anybody associated with them. There are videos on TikTok that are just like slideshows of people who support Dinesh and people who are part of Dinesh's mass coordinated hate and doxing and reporting campaigns that he uses to get people censored and ban anybody who criticizes him. That was a random rant, I guess, but F both of those people, honestly. The debate was aggravating to watch because of them. That's forever ago. Yeah, and I was like too nice back then. Like I didn't recognize really. I was just naive. It was forever ago. It was like 2-3 years ago. I was just out of college, and like I didn't recognize the real world yet, like how bad some people are. Like, there are just some people who are rotten to their core and like don't have, they're not honest actors. So I was like trying to be nice. I was like scared for Seabass. I'm like, dude, are you having like a mental breakdown? And I wasn't even trying to debate at a certain point. I was like, is this guy okay? But nowadays, I just would have kept shitting on him and kept provoking him and kept aggravating him, because it's like, that guy literally released my personal phone number on TikTok. Like, he's a piece of junk. I did not need to feel bad for him. Could you link the debate? Frick. Yeah, I probably can. It's some like random. Yeah. Let me tell y'all what, this shit is nuts. This is like the craziest thing I ever did since I started doing these videos and educational stuff. Seabass handcuffed himself to TikTok headquarters and put out posters flat on the ground. Yeah, so then after this debate where he had the mental breakdown, he flew to TikTok's headquarters and like handcuffed himself. This is when I thought he was like a CIA plant or something. He might be a Fed. But that boy handcuffed himself to the TikTok headquarters and demanded that they ban me. Like, this is how much of a mental breakdown he had. And he harasses Victoria Hammett all the time. Harasses the Conscious Lee. Release my personal numbers. Someone said, damn, your personal number is crazy. Yeah, and you know what the coolest thing is, though? Everybody who actually texted me, everyone who actually used my number that he released to the public was a supporter of Midwestern Marx. Sorry, I read some weird comment and I lost my train of thought. What's up with the sniffing, bro? You trying to get that? Are you talking about like, is that when you snort too much cocaine and there's like a drip in your nose? No, my nose is crooked from being broken so many times, and I have a cold right now. Sorry, that totally derailed my train of thought. But Seabass, who has over 400,000 followers, leaked my private phone number, and everyone who texted me was like, yo, really like your work. Just letting you know, Seabass doxed you. There was nobody who hated me. Wait, Seabass did what? He took an IQ test, and he found out he's dumber than a potato. Just kidding. He put my private phone number on TikTok. Okay, I have another story about Russia.
Welcome to the gray zone if you're just...
Because this was really interesting, and it says a lot. So this dashboard, Hamilton 68, it was called, which was put out by a, quote unquote left-wing think tank, which is hilarious. And you'll see why it's hilarious when I talk about the members of this think tank. But they basically, their job or what they did was put out a bunch of accounts, journalists, outlets, pundits, whoever else, that were Russian bots or Russian propagandists or spreading Russian disinformation and working directly with Twitter to try and get these accounts banned. Try and get Twitter to mass remove these Russian bot accounts. Well, what they found now, though, unfortunately, is that almost none of these accounts were actually Russian bot accounts. They were just accounts critical of the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine, who this liberal think tank didn't like. So they were trying to get Twitter to just take all these accounts away. Take away anybody who disagrees with them. Pure blatant censorship for political purposes. And they found that, even Twitter executives who admitted to working with the FBI in order to censor the story about Hunter Biden's laptop, even they, and you can see this now via leaked emails with the think tank, between the think tank and Twitter, even they were like, these stories are BS. At multiple points, there were Twitter employees thinking about blowing the lid off the whole thing, just being like, get out of here. Like, we're not going to just censor anybody who this think tank disagrees with politically. But it's just crazy that such a thing existed, and that it was so high profile. and that it had so many, so much money involved and so many big fish in the world of American politics involved. So here is another story. And Matt Taibbi, I don't know if Taibbi was the one who broke this story, but he definitely did a really good Twitter thread about it, basically detailing everything that went down. But left wing, quote unquote left wing, really a liberal think tank responsible for thousands of fake Russia stories. New Twitter or leaked Twitter files reveal. So this whole thing was the dashboard that they put out, that the think tank put out. The whole thing was the brainchild of Clint Watts, a former FBI agent and an MSNBC contributor, which shows you exactly how the revolving door between the private sector and the corporate media and the U.S. government works. So this guy was working for the FBI, or the U.S. intelligence agencies, I should say. So the FBI, an intelligence agency, an arm of the government. And then he goes on to be an MSNBC contributor. So he's working for the media and the U.S. government. No conflict of interest there. Oh, and then also he's working for this Democratic think tank looking to ban anybody who's, exposing U.S. proxy war. No conflict of interest here. No revolving door here. So that's hilarious. And the name of the think tank, which, you could probably guess it. These think tanks are always something like, the Freedom Democracy Fund for a better, more democratic and freedom-filled world of open world of U.S. democracy dominance, or something like that. But the name of this think tank was the Alliance for Securing Democracy. So pretty much the most generic U.S. imperialist think tank name that you could possibly come up with. Also included in the Alliance for Securing Democracy, that just tried to get anybody who disagrees with them politically or talks about NATO proxy war in Ukraine banned from Twitter, tried to have their free speech revoked, was John Podesta, former Hillary Clinton ally, the Obama-era acting CIA director, Michael Morell, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and former conservative activist, Bill Kristol, which, if you're going to call Bill Kristol an activist in anything, it's just like a war activist. You know how activists are usually supposed to fight for some cause? It's like a social justice cause, or, an economic cause, or something that's just, something that most people recognize as a social issue. Yeah, Bill Kristol is just an activist for war. He was one of the main crusaders for the war in Iraq, one of the main corporate mouthpieces and spokespeople saying that we needed to invade because Saddam had WMDs and this was going to be good for America, helped get millions and millions of people killed, was discredited after the war in Iraq, and now has been rehabilitated by the media and has been rehabilitated by these think tanks in Washington. So this also gives you an idea of how this works and how these individuals like Bill Kristol, are able to fail upwards their entire career. He lies us into a war that kills millions of people, the disastrous intervention in Iraq, the crime of the century, as Noam Chomsky calls it. And then he's still out here giving us foreign policy advice and working directly with Twitter to try and ban anybody who's against NATO's current proxy war. So these people just consistently fail upwards. They screw over the American people in every way possible. And they still have a job with MSNBC or whatever corporate military industrial complex think tank they want to work for. And yeah, these think tanks are comprised of the worst political ghouls you could imagine, but they have the ear of Twitter. Right, they have legitimacy with their names, like the Alliance for Securing Democracy and Bombing China think tank, and they have a lot of money behind them, a lot of high-profile backers, and a lot of clout with them, and they're able to do a lot of things, influence a lot of people, control the media, control the narrative, set narratives, invent narratives, ban anybody who they disagree with politically from tweeting. And it shows, this was a few years ago that this think tank was doing their thing, at a time when, I believe when Trump was still president, they were active, which shows again what I've said time and time again about the Democrat strategy in Ukraine. They wanted to continue their strategy in Ukraine and wage a proxy war in 2016, right? They expected Hillary Clinton to win that election. Hillary Clinton didn't win that election. Trump was the president for 4 years, and yes, the Pentagon, State Department, and NED and U.S. NGOs continued to meddle in Ukraine. It's not like they just left Ukraine alone under Trump. Ukraine was still extremely corrupt and still a Western puppet government. But not until a Democratic president, a member of the political establishment, actually got in power again, Joe Biden, did the proxy war in Ukraine continue. Did NATO start training thousands of troops along the Russian border and, floating the idea of adding Ukraine to NATO, which Russia had repeatedly said is a red line. But for the 4 years of Trump, we got the Russiagate narrative. Corporate media beat the war drums and the fear-mongering drums about Russia, said Russia was controlling our elections. They were the only reason Hillary lost, not because she was a notoriously and historically unpopular candidate. It was all Russia. They hacked our country, and Trump was a Manchurian candidate, and we just need to worry about Russia all the time. Russia, 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 put all our focus on Russia. So we got that for 4 years, which, was war propaganda for the proxy war that they've wanted since 2014, which Angela Merkel just recently admitted, that the peace agreements that were looking to be signed in 2014 were never going to be peace agreements. NATO was never going to agree to them. They were going to continue to build up Ukraine's military forces so then they could, wage a proxy war against Russia, weaken Russia as much as possible. So it's also out in the open at this point. It's also blatant and obvious the way that they've switched their strategy to a new Cold War of sorts. Hopefully it's a Cold War, not a hot war, with Russia and China. And then everything they do, whether it's the Chinese spy balloon and all the fear-mongering about that, or these think tanks trying to ban certain accounts for Twitter or from Twitter claiming that they're bots. It's all about this broader strategy of waging the new Cold War against Russia and China because they're challenging U.S. interests. And that's why we need to stand against what NATO's doing in Ukraine, right? And people think it's all about like, oh, you're a Russia supporter, you're a Putin supporter, whatever, right? You can, there's a lot of, people who would say straight up they support the Russian intervention. There's a lot of people who say they don't. They think it was hasty. And these, people who I respect land on both sides of the issue. But what they agree upon, the people that I respect, is that NATO created this, right? That NATO led us to this situation. The U.S. State Department, the U.S. coup, the NED, and the, Western NGOs that serve Western finance capitalists on Wall Street, they created this. They provoked this. They are, sending Ukrainians to their death in mass. It's not Russia. And certainly not the people of Donetsk and Lugansk who just want their freedom and have had their homes shelled by U.S. proxy forces and ethno-nationalists for the last 8 years plus. Thank you so much, Paulo Jacob Silva, for the 10. What's CHF? Oh, I got to look this up now. Swiss franc? Is it franc? Swiss franc. Sorry, I'm not great with currency. I should probably know that. Like, I'm the geopolitics guy at Midwestern Marks. Shit. I don't even know what all the currencies are. I especially got to learn that with U.S. dollar hegemony tanking. But thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you for supporting the project. Love it. Love that we've been getting super chats all day and always. From people all around the world, people with all different kinds of currency, coming together, showing that internationalist, socialist support, helping to boost that socialist education here in the imperial core, the heart of the empire, the heart of the capitalist empire that is the USA. So thank you for that. With that, I'm going to head out, folks. I got wrestling practice coming up. I no longer have to commute 30 minutes to wrestling, which is going to make streaming a lot easier. I've been extremely busy, had so much crap going on in my personal life the past few days. I'm trying to, if you want to know what's been going on in my personal life, follow my personal Twitter, Smithhead16, SMITHEDD16, because it's not like I'm hiding it. I'm not going to talk about it right now or on stream for like at least a week. Or you can follow my personal Instagram, Edward, the number 2 Lane, Lane. But either way, had a lot going on, but now I'm back to the regular streams. I also have been busy filming and editing Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State, Reading Guide Part 3, Chapter 2. Part 1 of Chapter 2, probably. But either way, that will be out very soon. In the process of editing that, got it all filmed. That took me way longer than I thought it would, just as my homework always does. But either way, more time, more freedom in my schedule than I've had in a while now. So you're going to be getting a lot of streams. Yeah, looking forward to it. Peace, all.